The void of space stretched endlessly around the colossal starship. Drifting through the silence of the cosmos, the structure gleamed under the distant light of an unknown sun. The vast corridors within pulsed with the energy of unseen forces, its halls empty except for the whispering hum of life support systems and the occasional flicker of artificial illumination. No dress code had ever been enforced within the vessel, the very concept, discarded long ago by those who believed in the purity of existence free from the shackles of cloth and concealment. Humanity had reached beyond the stars in search of knowledge and connection, venturing far into the darkness to encounter new forms of life. Some had been hostile, others indifferent, but none as peculiar as the being known as Kahir, a creature of shifting hues and glimmering filaments that undulated with every movement. Kahir belonged to a species unbound by the traditions of physical covering, the idea itself an alien concept, their bodies a flowing expression of thought, emotion, and intent. Kahir's presence aboard the starship signified the first step in a fragile yet profound diplomatic exchange. The ship's captain, Adrian Vale, stood before the viewing deck, gazing into the abyss, his thoughts adrift like the vessel itself. Kahir stood beside him, their form ever-changing, shifting in hues of deep violet and soft indigo, a silent conversation passing between them, one spoken not in words, but in the subtlest of gestures and movements. Their differences were evident, yet in that moment there was a shared understanding, a silent acceptance that neither fabric nor convention defined the essence of one's being. The crew had long abandoned the necessity of clothing, seeing it as an outdated vestige of a past burdened by shame and restriction. Here, within the sanctum of the ship, they existed as they were unencumbered by textile barriers. The presence of Kahir only reinforced the notion that their choice was not a human eccentricity, but a universal truth, one that transcended the confines of species and culture. It was a philosophy that had shaped their very existence, allowing them to explore the depths of their humanity without fear, without pretense, without masks. Kahir observed the humans with an air of curiosity, their filaments shimmering in response to the waves of heat and energy radiating from the bodies around them. There was no discomfort, no hesitation, only the natural rhythm of interaction between two beings unbound by fabric or falsehood. Kahir's own people communicated through the language of form and hue, every shift of color, every gentle undulation, a sentence, a thought, a feeling, laid bare in its purest form. Among the humans, Kahir found a rare kinship, one that defied words and gestures, one that spoke to the core of existence itself. Diplomatic exchanges had always been fraught with misunderstanding, yet here, within the corridors of the starship, there was no need for elaborate rituals, no need for the trappings of protocol. The humans and Kahir spoke through their presence, their shared experience, bridging the gulf between species without the weight of imposed tradition. Adrian watched as Kahir moved through the ship, their form adapting subtly to the environment, reflecting the light and energy around them. In that moment, he understood that true connection did not require layers or pretense, it only required openness and trust. Days passed and the lines between human and alien blurred into something new, something undefined, yet undeniably real. Kahir learned the nuances of human interaction, absorbing their unspoken customs, their habits, their ways of being. In return, the humans began to see through Kahir's eyes, understanding the world not in terms of barriers, but in the fluidity of existence itself. Clothing was a relic of a past they had long left behind, and Kahir's presence affirmed that they had chosen the right path, a path that embraced the raw authenticity of being. The starship drifted through the void, its passengers united in a silent bond that transcended the need for spoken language. Kahir and Adrian often stood together in quiet contemplation, gazing into the endless stretch of stars, each finding solace in the presence of the other. There were no borders here, no divisions, only the vast expanse of space, and the shared understanding that life in all its forms was meant to be lived unshackled and free. Kahir introduced Adrian to the deeper forms of their language of movement, showing him how subtle shifts of color and texture conveyed emotions to complex for spoken words. Adrian struggled at first, his rigid human mind accustomed to speech and definition. But slowly he began to understand, and Kahir in turn learned the weight of human touch, the way a hand resting on another's skin could carry meaning beyond sound or sight. They were bridging a divide that had seemed insurmountable. As their understanding deepened, so did their bond. The rest of the crew observed with quiet awe their captain and the alien moving in unison, their unspoken conversations flowing like waves through the air. The crew had long since accepted their own ways of being. But this was something new, something profound. They were not just existing as they were evolving into something greater. The ship received a transmission from Earth, a request for a formal report on the progress of the diplomatic mission. Adrian hesitated, knowing that the truth of what they had discovered could not be confined to words on a screen. He tried to explain, but the very nature of their experience defied standard reports and data entries. They had found not just a new species, but a new way of existing. Earth's response was swift. A delegation was being sent to evaluate the success of the mission and to assess Cahir's people. Adrian knew that their visitors would come with expectations, with assumptions, with the weight of a culture that still saw fabric and decorum as necessities. He feared that they would not understand, that they would impose their old ways upon something delicate and new. The delegation arrived in pristine uniforms, their eyes filled with curiosity and apprehension. They stepped aboard the ship and found themselves confronted with a reality they had not expected, a world where skin met air, where form was unhidden, where expression was not spoken but lived. They faltered, hesitant, uncertain, their rigid structures shaken. Cahir approached the delegates with calm curiosity, their form shifting to mirror the newcomers, reflecting their own nervous energy back at them. The leader of the delegation, an ambassador named Elias Cross, struggled to maintain composure, his hands clenching at his uniform as if it could shield him from the reality before him. Adrian stood beside Cahir, silent, yet resolute, knowing that understanding could not be forced, only offered. Days passed and the delegation watched. They saw the ease with which the crew existed, the way Cahir's presence was not an intrusion, but an integration. They saw how communication flourished unburdened by artificial barriers, and slowly, one by one, they began to shed their layers, hesitantly at first, but then with a quiet acceptance that this was not a challenge, but an invitation. Elias Cross stood before Adrian and Cahir, his uniform now gone, his expression one of, or rather than, resistance. He admitted that he had never known freedom like this, that he had never imagined a world where connection could be so pure. He requested that they bring this knowledge back to Earth to show that there was another way. The Starship set course for home, carrying not just Cahir, but the seeds of a revolution, a new way of seeing, of being, of understanding. The barriers of cloth and convention had fallen, and in their place something limitless had begun to grow. As the ship sped toward Earth, Adrian and Cahir stood together at the viewing deck, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. Neither spoke, for there was no need. In the silence, in the openness, in the raw and unfiltered truth of existence, they had already said everything that mattered.